Happy Father's Day. Last week, I talked about two articles, or one in particular, that came out in The Observer a week ago. A week on, and Hannah Summers and Beatrix Campbell are at it again, and they've published another article, which I'm going to talk about and go into a bit of detail. But I want to start with a quote from Benjamin Franklin, which is, "Half the truth is often a great lie." I want you to think about that. If you're only getting half the truth, you're not getting the whole truth. And half the truth can be very persuasive when you're not told about the rest, or you're told the other half, which is true, is false or fake. That being the lie. So I want you to think and just understand where I'm coming from, because you need to understand that the whole truth is not being given to you. You are being fed information that is only half right. Okay, let's get into the article. Inquiry urged into parental alienation court experts. Lawyers and MPs in England and Wales express concern over unregulated psychologists who play a key role in disputes over domestic abuse. And they got a lovely big picture of Robert Halfon, who is the MP for Harlow. Anyway, there have been 3 letters that have been sent to Dominic Raab. The first one is from the Victims Commission. I couldn't actually find a copy of it online, but the Observer says that the Victims Commissioner for London, Claire Waxman, and a group of MPs write, "We believe there is ample evidence that children and survivors of domestic abuse are being put at risk by the evidence provided by unregulated experts who do not belong to any professional body and therefore cannot be held accountable." Now, as I said last week, I showed you where Claire Waxman sits when it comes to parental alienation. Goes on to say that it comes after the Observer reported warnings from the Association of Clinical Psychologists that experts who are not regulated have suggested inappropriate diagnosis and made recommendations for children to be removed from their mothers based on these diagnoses. I totally agree with that. We shouldn't have unregulated experts. Our experts need to be regulated. They need to be regulated with training. We need training that ensures that the whole picture of parental alienation is given. We need to have training that ensures the whole picture is painted so that experts understand the full dynamics of this abuse. Let's get back. 5 MPs signed the letter, including the Shadow Minister for Victims and Youth Justice, Anna McMorran, the Shadow Minister for Domestic Violence, Jess Phillips, the Tory MPs Caroline Nokes and Robert Halfon, and the Labour MP Sarah Champion also signed. They highlight concerns that allegations of parental alienation are being used to counter claims of domestic abuse, and that children's genuine fears of abuse can be subverted by experts who are used as evidence of alienation. Right, counterclaims. Hang on a minute. I'm telling you right now that parental alienation is a form of domestic abuse. It is not a counter to domestic abuse. It is domestic abuse. Let's get that straight. It is just a very insidious, nasty, pernicious type of abuse that devastates children's lives and wrecks their identity and can have lifelong consequences for a child. It needs to be stopped. Back to the article. This in turn means judges are making child contact and residence arrangements based on unsound advice. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. We need our experts, our CAFCASS experts, to understand exactly what parental alienation is. Too often, even the CAFCASS workers, I have been told, don't know what their own definition is. So I suggest that if you work for CAFCASS, you go back there and you read the definition. Carry on. The letter calls on the Ministry of Justice, in particular the Family Division of the High Court, Sir Andrew McFarlane, to commit to an urgent inquiry into the use of parental alienation experts in the family court. The Tory peer, Arminka Hellick, has written a separate letter to the Justice Secretary with her concerns. At this point in time, I haven't seen that either. But given her very outspoken objection to the inclusion of parental alienation in the Domestic Abuse Act, I would argue I have a pretty good idea where it's coming from. Let's get back to this MP, Robert Halfon. And he says, as the MP for Harlow, I have seen some thoroughly tragic cases of domestic abuse, but it always seems to me that the family court is weighed against the victim. I'm going to say that again. Weighed against the victim rather than the perpetrator. There is one hurdle after another that the victim must jump over in terms of parental custody and access. Anything that can be done to ensure that the court system presents a fair and real chance to limit parental access by abusers is welcome. I totally agree. The thing is, these victims, if they want to appeal the decision or they cite that someone has got their decision wrong and they try to explain it, they are then met with more and more hurdles. And I've heard many parents who have been denied access to their children for no good reason at all, and I really do mean no good reason at all. And they then try to go to the Ombudsman to complain, and stalling tactics are used one after the other to prevent the truth being revealed. Now, this practice is systemic, and that needs to be stopped too. Backing the calls are 85 academics, lawyers, charity leaders and health workers who have signed a third letter. Now, I have got sight of this, and I'm going to go over that in a minute, to RAB. They warn there are clear dangers to the public who may unwittingly hire an unregulated expert witness and therefore have no legal redress should harm occur. I'm going to try and include a little snippet of a post that someone put up showing how easy it is to be taken in by this argument. Natalie Page of the Survivor Family Network, and also the court said, is among those who have signed the letter, along with people from organisations including Centre for Women's Justice, the Feminist Law Society, Rape Crisis England and Wales, Refuge, Brunel University, aka Dr. Adrian Barnett, the University of Suffolk, Equality Now and Safe Schools Alliance. Page said, this crisis can only be resolved by a full and frank inquiry into the use of psychological experts in the family court. The stakes for victims of abuse couldn't be higher. I totally agree with that, Natalie. I do agree there. I just don't agree with the fact that you are pushing only half the story. I'm actually going to go down to the letter now. And the letter, with the heading from the Survivor Family Network, starts off, Dear Justice Secretary, we are writing following the investigation published in the Observer newspaper on the 12th of June 2022, which explores the use of unregulated parental alienation experts in family courts. There is a growing body of evidence revealing that mothers and children. Why is it mothers? Fathers are alienated too. Please stop making it gendered. Who have been subjected to domestic abuse are increasingly being met with counter-allegation of parental alienation and are therefore being put at risk by the evidence provided by these experts. Counter-allegations again. Hang on a minute. We're saying parental alienation is abuse. It's not a counter-allegation. Then it goes on to say the Ministry of Justice's own harm report. I would argue it's a harmful report. Published in 2020, June 2020, so 2 years ago, revealed unsafe practices, silencing and re-traumatising the victims and children. Now, we just need to go back and think about who these victims were that they interviewed. These victims were signed up members of Women's Aid and Refuge. They were people who had gone through the process seeking their support. It was not a wide-scale report that kind of got victims from across all the domestic abuse charities, especially including the men's charities, and it definitely didn't include Match Mothers, which I was a part of. It only used those mothers who had used refuges and used the services of those domestic abuse charities. I also need to add that in their survey, they didn't have as many respondents as Recover Our Kids had in their survey, which had 1,400 respondents. And I know that Parental Alienation UK had 2,000 respondents to their survey. And yet we have been totally and utterly disregarded. Our evidence is not important. Just saying, I'm just putting it out there. This is what decisions are being made on, and it is not safe. She then goes on to say, based on pseudo-scientific theories of parental alienation. Oh, please. parental alienation is real, and it is scientifically researched by the likes of Jennifer Harman, Alan Blocky, Amy Baker, and I could go on. There's a whole list of them if you want to know more. You can find them on the Parental Alienation UK site. And there has been so much research since 2016. It is sound, it is scientific, it is peer-reviewed. Scientists like to have their findings questioned. What we do, we don't silence victims. Sorry, I'm not a scientist. Anyway, parental alienation is not contained within either of the two major international classifications of diseases, the DMS-5 and the World Health Organization draft CD11. What they don't tell you is it was included and they managed to get it withdrawn. Why? It should be in there. It is such an insidious form of abuse. Numerous organisations nationally and internationally have denounced the credibility of parental alienation theories and have condemned their use in family court proceedings. Let's hear who they are, because this bit's important. Including the United Nations. I would argue it's the United Nations Women Organisation, but we'll go on that. CEDAW, Grevio, the NSPCC, the American Psychological Society, the New Zealand Psychological Society, the European Association for Psychotherapy, and the US National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. Now, either they are party to the feminist narrative, which is a very narrow understanding of parental alienation, or they have been duped into believing this narrative and haven't bothered to do their research. Shame on you if you didn't do your research to find out exactly what parental alienation is. The Harm Report raised concerns which are borne out by our professional work practices and research. The mother's disclosure, and that's a key point, the mothers, not the father's disclosure, just the mothers. And it's not all mothers, because it didn't include me, of domestic abuse and children's fears of abuse and disclosures of sexual abuse are being interpreted by parental alienation experts as evidence of alienation. Now, hang on a minute. If the child is making disclosures, these need to be properly researched. You need to get to the bottom of this to find out that whether the child really is at risk of being abused or whether they are making the allegation to please a parent because the parent has, dare I say, coached them to say it. I'm just putting it out there. Psychologists can tell the difference. They know how to get beneath the surface and to find out what the child is really frightened of. And we need to do that. This has led to victims and children being afraid to even discuss abuse for fear of children being transferred to the care of an abusive parent, based on the recommendations of these experts. I'm not denying that this happens. But again, we need experts who know what they're doing. That's why we welcome the inquiry, but we welcome it provided the whole truth, not half the truth, the whole truth is put forward. The Observer investigation now reveals that some of these expert witnesses are completely unregulated and lacking the qualifications and expertise necessary to make diagnoses in parents and children, provide valid expert opinion and make recommendations. This means that judges can make life-changing decisions for the children, including changes of residence to an abusive parent and the termination of contact with a victim parent, based on unqualified and spacious opinion and recommendations. In my case, there were no psychologists involved. It was based purely on the evidence from CAFCASS, which was non-existent because CAFCASS couldn't get their act together to even interview me before the first hearing. Apparently that was for the second hearing, but residency was ordered at the first hearing, and by the time the second hearing came along, it was too late. So let's get back to CAFCASS. They are making decisions. They're the ones that write up with their judgment. Yes, ultimately it's the judge that makes the decision, but invariably be based on what the CAFCASS report says. And if the CAFCASS social worker, the officer, whoever it is writing that report, doesn't understand the full dynamics of parental alienation, you have got a problem. You are not going to get justice. Because if they've been told that it's this narrow understanding of parental alienation, There is no way that they will then contemplate that there could be another side to this. And that is what is so devastating. And the fact that the Cafcass workers are totally and utterly swamped in work at the moment means they haven't got the time to spend any more time. So if someone's telling them, oh, take this shortcut, parental alienation, this is a decision to make, tremendous harm. Tremendous harm. It then talks about the growing concern about the lucrative parental alienation industry. Yeah, I talked about that in my last video. Go and have a look at that. For all these reasons, we call on the Ministry of Justice in partnership with the President of the Family Division to immediately initiate and commit to an urgent inquiry into the use of parental alienation experts in the family court. Bring it on, that's what I say. Bring it on. And the memo, I'll put a link to that in the description below. I was going to go over it, but I think you need to understand parental alienation manipulates a child to utterly reject a parent they previously loved and felt safe and secure with. But the damage that this alienating behaviour does to that child is incredibly significant. At the very least, it questions their own identity. At the very worst, they don't know who they are and they don't know why they're living, and they commit suicide. We need to address this issue, and it needs to be addressed now. Let's stop this heinous, insidious, pernicious abuse in its tracks. If you've made it this far, well done. And to the dads who've made it this far, happy Father's Day. I'm doing my bit. Let's hoping this time next year you might have your kids back in your lives. And if you have got this far, please, 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 please subscribe. I always used to think people were really off their rocker when they said that, but I'm saying it to you now purely because the more subscribers, the more we can get this message out there. As you can see, we are facing a mountain here, and we need to get the truth out there. It's not going to be an easy task, but we have the truth on our side. So please subscribe, support, follow me on Twitter, and let's get change where it can be made. Thank you.